approval. And we know that the more people get to know him, the more they really have serious reservations about him. So, new leadership and some new direction, more responsive to what's going on at street level, I think can make a significant change for us.
I'll just tell people, Mr. Hardy, that on the right of their screen, they're seeing what is probably, as you said, a very familiar shot for Canadians. That is outside of Rideau Cottage, where the Prime Minister lives with his children, and it is indeed where he, every day, during the pandemic, almost every day, I would say every day, came out to address Canadians, update Canadians on measures the government was taking during the pandemic, and to reassure Canadians. Today, a different message entirely, but also perhaps some words of reassurance about the path forward for the government and the path forward for the country as it faces down Donald Trump in about 2 weeks' time. Mr. Hardy, I'll just end on this. It took a long time, as you say, for the Prime Minister to get to this point, and everyone seemed to want to give him the space over the holidays to reflect. Did it happen too late? Is this still going to be very hard for the next leader to get a leadership race in place to address Donald Trump? Is this happening too late?
Well, first and foremost, government continues to work. And I think you've made that point this morning, Rosemary.
Yes.
It's like the old thing about apple trees. The best time to plant an apple tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So, is it too late? Well, time will only tell, but it's happening now, and we have to work on that basis.
Just maybe a last word for you, Mr. Hardy, because you were one of the people that did push Mr. Trudeau to this point. You still feel that was the right decision. There's no hard feelings on your part.
Oh, none whatsoever. Canada owes Mr. Trudeau a lot, considering what he's had to deal with and the way he's handled it. He came in with a vision that the country really embraced, but, times change. The country is not, in the hope and hard work frame of mind that it was back in 2015. We do have to really reflect what the country's mood is, and I believe that new leadership will be challenged by caucus to make sure that that happens.
Okay, Ken Hardy, thank you for making the time. I'm sure we or David will speak to you again later today. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and as I said, you are looking there at your screen, on the right of your screen, at the door of Rideau Cottage, where the Prime Minister lives with his family, and that is where the Prime Minister will appear in about 5 minutes or so, if he's on time, to tell us about his decision for the future, which is, as we've been talking about, to leave as leader of the Liberal Party. And from there, things are going to change pretty dramatically over the next number of weeks and months. I'll bring back David Cochrane, the host of Power and Politics, who's been obviously part of our coverage all morning. David, we've heard a couple of people now, so a couple of the caucus members who were wanting and hoping for this to happen. Definitely a sense of relief and also appreciation for the work of the Prime Minister. And in some ways, I do think that certainly there will be criticism around the timing and some of the other things Justin Trudeau's done. But what he may also do today, in some ways, David, is protect some of his legacy as Prime Minister and a Liberal Party leader by leaving, perhaps not as quickly as some wanted, but with some grace and a decision in terms of his own timing to some extent.
Yeah, and the policy legacy, that's really going to be put to the test in the election, right? And quite frankly, Rosie, probably also in the leadership. I mean,
yes.
Is everybody who runs to be Liberal leader going to support the carbon tax? I think that's unlikely. And you've already heard Mark Carney give a speech to Canada 2020 last year in Toronto, I believe, where he says that he feels the carbon tax has served its purpose, but maybe now there's a way to look at another way of attacking that problem. So I'm very curious to hear what the Prime Minister has to say about this. Appropriately, perhaps he's doing it, with that backdrop of Rideau Cottage behind him, Rosemary, where I have some deja vu of you and I waiting for him to come out during most of 2020 to say how the government was responding to the COVID pandemic in terms of vaccine procurement and the hunt for supplies and the economic supports that they would be bringing out for businesses and individuals across the country. He is perhaps the most visible and viewed Prime Minister in the history of the country because of the daily intensity of those appearances and just this being the social media age and sort of really a location that defined the agenda for their first minority government after the 2019 election is now going to be the backdrop for his soon-to-be announced departure as Liberal leader and as Prime Minister. So thematically, it's certainly very fitting. You know, his legacy as party leader is one thing. Like, he's won 3 elections. He took them from 3rd to 1st. That 2015 victory, as Aaron was talking about, saved the party and rebuilt it, though they were reduced to a minority in 2019, which had a lot of moments in that campaign that in a different time with a different leader might have been fatal to that candidate. And then an increased minority in 2021 that had the debate not gone a certain way and inflamed maybe the Bloc Québécois campaign in Quebec. The Liberals felt they were on the cusp of maybe winning a second majority in 3 years. But sort of since then, their agenda has been in many ways driven by the NDP through the Supply and Confidence Agreement, you know, giving them the comfort they needed to manage the House of Commons and survive, you know, any sort of legislative challenges to their government, but also kind of giving them a focus on policies such as dental care and pharmacare that wasn't there prior to that agreement with Jagmeet Singh that they signed. So it's going to be interesting to see what he says in terms of the timing, how people respond to the timing, how the party responds to the timing, and how the potential candidates to replace Justin Trudeau respond to that timing. Because as we've been talking about, you need a long runway to come in as a party leader and then build a credible pitch to be the Prime Minister. And there isn't a long runway available for anybody who comes into this job to replace Justin Trudeau as he announces his departure on the 6th of January.
And if you know that the party is probably not going to win the next election, because that's certainly what the polls are suggesting now, does that also factor into people who want the job, or do they decide to sit this one out as the party rebuilds? Because certainly that also happened before Justin Trudeau, as various people tried to take on the job unsuccessfully until he took it over in 2013 and then led to that breakthrough win in 2015. But you're quite right. This is a familiar sight for many Canadians here, Rideau Cottage, where the Prime Minister lives, just behind Rideau Hall, where the Governor General lives, and where he was earlier today, talking to the Governor General about this request for prorogation that was granted until March 24th. The pandemic, certainly one of the biggest challenges that faced Justin Trudeau through his 9 years as Prime Minister, where he had to make really huge decisions that affected Canadians deeply throughout the pandemic. Sometimes the right decisions for Canadians, and other times Canadians had some problems with some of those decisions. Vaccine mandates, for instance, something that continued to be a problem for the government going forward. But a place where millions of Canadians were watching through those days and weeks and months to find out how the government was going to respond to an unprecedented moment in this country's history with COVID-19. Just one of the things that challenged Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, and there are lots of others, challenges, controversies, and as David points out, major policy moves, including $10 a day daycare, the Canada Child Benefit, legalizing cannabis, Senate reform, whether you like it or not. Senate reform, whether you like it or not, and of course renegotiating the new NAFTA with Donald Trump. Part of that, of course, done with the help of Chrystia Freeland, who's no longer part of cabinet now. We are expecting the Prime Minister to come out any moment. I'll bring in Aaron Weary here, and Aaron, I will cut you off if he comes out, as you know how it goes. What are you reflecting on as we wait for Justin Trudeau?
I think you guys are right that the setting is interesting and a reminder of that time during COVID, when I think Justin Trudeau became, in a way, you know, for maybe the first Prime Minister since King to really kind of be a wartime Prime Minister in a way, having to lead the country through what was a really profound and you know, life-altering crisis for the nation for, you know, several years, really. And it was, I think, also sort of the last time, you know, Canadians really rallied behind Justin Trudeau, especially in the early days of that pandemic. You know, you can point out that there was a rally around the flag effect in lots of countries and in lots of jurisdictions. But I do think that Canadians responded well to what the federal government did initially in the pandemic, and then arguably, you know, towards the end of the pandemic, with the rollout of vaccines after, you know, some initial sort of hiccups. At the same time, the pandemic also becomes, I think, sort of the start of the end for Justin Trudeau, insofar as coming out of that pandemic, it seems like ancient history now, but there was lots of talk during the pandemic of, building back better, and there being sort of this kind of, post-war boom coming out of the pandemic of, learning the lessons and putting into action the things we'd learned about society and government. And that sort of moment never came. It ended really with the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, the divisive debates over vaccine mandates, and the backlash to the Prime Minister that we saw, in those flags that were waved during the Freedom Convoy, and that sort of have become kind of emblematic of the end of the Trudeau era. And then you saw, coming out of that, the mood of the nation really sour. I think some of that has to be attributed to the trauma of the pandemic. A lot of it has to be attributed to inflation in a way that people hadn't experienced in a generation, rising house prices, rising interest rates, the continuation of the opioid epidemic. The coming out of that pandemic has proved to sort of be the point where Trudeau, I think, lost his hold on the country, and where the country started looking for somebody different. Yeah. And, I think Justin Trudeau's instinct at all times is to bet on himself and believe that he can prove doubters wrong, and that he can come from behind, and that he can overcome the odds. And I think that this time it proved that just wasn't possible. And now the sort of the end of that, the end result of that, is we're going to have a very, very quick Liberal leadership by the sounds of it, to find a replacement, and that replacement is going to have to pretty quickly go into an election. And they're going to go into that election, presumably behind in some way. We'll see, I think, as a result of this Liberal leadership in some way, how much of the Liberal Party's polling and how much of the Conservative Party's support in the polls is simply based on how much people are tired of Justin Trudeau. We'll see whether a Liberal Party that maybe is slightly different but doesn't completely deviate from what it has done over the last decade, if there's a different person in charge of that party, do people react to it differently? We'll see. But I think, the way Justin Trudeau has kind of come to this end is I guess, fittingly dramatic and somewhat messy. And now it's going to be kind of a very frenetic couple of months as, first the Liberal Party tries to pick a new leader, and then, let's not forget Justin Trudeau is going to remain as Prime Minister and will be Prime Minister on the day Donald Trump is inaugurated as President. And that will be the other thing that he, in his final days in office, will presumably have to deal with.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider there for sure. I was also struck, as you said there, that at how the pandemic became a turning point for his leadership, and also I would suggest the other piece of that, which was invoking for the first time the Emergency Measures Act to deal with that convoy, which also fed into a lot of anger towards Justin Trudeau. And I think it's a very fair question to ask whether Liberal Party fortunes improve in any dramatic way once Justin Trudeau is gone, given the party will have been in power for a decade. And that is sort of the life course of a government and of a party in this country. So whoever the next leader is going to be has some real significant challenges. And again, that could shape who indeed enters the leadership race. Fittingly, the Prime Minister is late. This has not changed. He will emerge shortly, though, I'm sure, from his home to speak to Canadians, again, for the first time since things have really let's be honest, gone badly over the past number of weeks since Chrystia Freeland quit her job as Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister because the Prime Minister told her he was going to move her to a different role and he was going to have a different kind of cabinet entirely. That entire plan fell apart, and Chrystia Freeland left in a dramatic fashion on the very day she was supposed to table the fall economic update. Justin Trudeau was forced to put in place a new finance minister, shuffle his cabinet to some extent, and for the past couple of weeks, he has been spending time with his family, presumably talking to advisors and friends about next steps. And as soon as he comes out of that door, he will tell us that his next step is to leave as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. He is, we are told, going to take about 4 questions, 2 in English, 2 in French. So I won't get my year-end interview at this moment either, David, but I would imagine that this is a difficult moment for the Prime Minister. He can be an emotional person, and knowing how much time he's had to reflect on this, perhaps he's at peace with it. I'm speculating here, but giving up a job that you love is, even if part of it was your fault, still isn't a fun day.
No, I don't imagine any part of this is easy. And just speaking with some people close to the Prime Minister throughout the weekend and even this morning in between the periods where I'm not on the air, they're sad about this, but there's also some relief, from some of them that at least this is, I don't want to say it's completely their choosing, because it's not completely their choosing, but it's a better departure than going into the buzzsaw of a general election with the polling dynamic and the political dynamic, what it is, and getting smashed upon the rocks of shifting public opinion, which is kind of where this ship was going. Look, you look at the Langley-Cloverdale by-election, which they lost by 50 points. That was a seat they had held and won in 2 of the last 3 elections. In Elmwood, Transcona, which is a Winnipeg seat that the NDP won and the NDP held, but the Liberals got 4% in an urban riding while in government, which is a bad number. And then you, of course, have the Toronto St. Paul by-election and the Salimard-Verdun by-election, seats held by cabinet ministers, safe Liberal seats, no longer held by cabinet ministers, no longer held by Liberals. And, so it's not just public opinion polling, which can be fickle and volatile and can change. These are actual outcomes and actual results. And then you've got the suddenly florid letter writing campaigns from inside the caucus and inside the backbench calling for him to go, as more and more people either go public, adding to the calls for the Prime Minister to step down as Liberal leader to give them a chance to fight back as best they can against Pierre Poilievre in the next election. Or, others just announcing, like Marco Mendicino did a few days ago, that they're just not going to run again. And how many more of those are there? And how many more of those are there if the Prime Minister stays? Because there is a real scenario where he chooses to stay on and a bunch of other people decide that they're going to go as a result, right? And so you're left sort of leading the ashes of a once sizable and powerful majority government. So nothing about this has been easy, and just like nothing about being the Prime Minister has been easy, and just like nothing about becoming the next Liberal leader and the next Prime Minister will be easy. I was just jotting down sort of like what the job ad would look like. There's a polling deficit, there's a fundraising gap, there's a motivated and financed opponent. You have a jittery caucus. You're coming off a string of by-election defeats. And by the way, Donald Trump is coming back into the White House in 14 days. That's what you're signing up for, should you step forward. And a lot of people may look at that and look at the state of things and say, why would you want to do this? Well, for whatever period of time you get to be the Prime Minister of a G7 country, you do get a chance to make your argument to hold on to that job in an election. And I've covered politics for about 20 years or so now, Rosie, and the people who wait for the timing to be perfect, somebody else who's hungrier and more motivated takes it from them when the timing is perfect. If you want a job like this, you go for the job when it's available. You don't wait for the stars to align and this perfect constellation of facts to appear, because when the stars are aligned and the facts are perfect, the job isn't available, or a much more competitive and more aggressive field of candidates comes in and takes it from you. So that's why you run now. And you hope that you can save the furniture enough to be either a strong opposition, to pull off a miracle and win this thing, or to hold Pierre Poilievre to a minority government, based on where things are today, and allow yourself to build back. That has to be the play, that has to be the argument, and that has to be the expectation if you're signing up for this now.
And the person who would agree wholly with your analysis there, David, is none other than Justin Trudeau, who did just that, who took the party when it was in dire straits, built it back through various ways, not only recruiting star candidates, including Chrystia Freeland, changing the way the membership worked, changing the fundraising, changing the way the party communicated with Canadians, moving the agenda and the policy agenda towards a much more progressive agenda, yes, in part because the NDP, but in part because that's what Justin Trudeau wanted, and then eventually winning a majority government in 2015. So you're right, there's a playbook here, and the candidates that we've been talking about for Liberal leadership will have to decide if they have what it takes to get this done in a short period of time, knowing that the payoff may not be immediate, but it might happen eventually. But also facing, as you pointed out, a formidable opponent who not only has a whole pile of cash, but also has managed to really speak to Canadians in a very impressive and successful way through a very difficult period for them. And the irony a little bit with what we're seeing today, and I'll go to you, David, and then Aaron, if the Prime Minister continues to be late, is that one of the things that I understand the Prime Minister and his people were waiting for was to see the economy start turning, right? To see the inflation numbers down, see the interest rates go down, and just start hoping that Canadians would start to feel some of that. There was a story over the course of the weekend that rents have gone down in Toronto. They've gone down in the GTA. These are all things that they thought could lead to people believing in him again. We've got the 2-minute warning for the Prime Minister, but I'll let you say something here, David.
Yeah, look, that has always been sort of the hope, but hope isn't a plan. And those are all external factors that you're counting on to change the dynamic in the country. And while inflation is under control, the cost of living is not. Those price increases that have been hitting the system since the pandemic, since the invasion of Ukraine, they're still baked in, and cost is elevated. And even if people are seeing proper wage growth now, they're not necessarily getting further ahead, because a basket of food costs more, your mortgage costs more. And so while the increases will be smaller for the people who are renewing now and in the future than they were a year ago, they're still increases, and they're still mad about it. And the other thing that's happening is that inflationary pressures resume and monetary policy eases. It's largely because the economy is slumping. Unemployment's nearly 7%, growth is flat and declining. There's some real economic headwinds the country is facing, and that is a big reason why, even though those conditions changed, the political conditions didn't.
Yeah, and of course the criticism that the government didn't move fast enough to respond to some of those issues around affordability and the cost of living. Something that they did try to do, as you'll remember, before Christmas with the GST holiday, which is still in place until mid-February, and then those rebate checks that may well not ever see the light of day. We will see, but Parliament is now being prorogued till March 24th, so it seems hard to imagine that those things will happen. Prime Minister of Canada expected to come out of his home there, Rideau Cottage, which is on the grounds of Rideau Hall, to speak directly to Canadians. There he is, announcing that he will step down as Liberal leader of Canada. Let's listen now to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
This again. Bon matin. Every morning I've woken up as Prime Minister. I've been inspired by the resilience, the generosity, and the determination of Canadians. It is the driving force of every single day I have the privilege of serving in this office. That is why, since 2015, I've fought for this country, for you, to strengthen and grow the middle class. Why we rallied to support each other through the pandemic, to advance reconciliation, to defend free trade on this continent, to stand strong with Ukraine and our democracy, and to fight climate change and get our economy ready for the future. We are at a critical moment in the world. Mes chers Canadiens, à chaque matin, je me suis réveillé.
Each and every morning, I woke up as Prime Minister, inspired by the resilience, generosity, and determination that characterizes us so well as Canadians. This is what motivates me each and every day that I've had the privilege of serving as Prime Minister. This is why, since 2015, I have fought for this country and for you, to strengthen the middle class. We have mobilized as Canadians to support each other during the pandemic in order to advance reconciliation, in order to defend free trade on our continent, for our support of Ukraine and democracy, and to fight against climate change and to prepare the economy for the future. We are going through a critical time.
My friends, as you all know, I'm a fighter. Every bone in my body has always told me to fight because I care deeply about Canadians. I care deeply about this country, and I will always be motivated by what is in the best interest of Canadians. And the fact is, despite best efforts to work through it, Parliament has been paralyzed for months after what has been the longest session of a minority parliament in Canadian history. That's why this morning I advised the Governor General that we need a new session of Parliament. She has granted this request, and the House will now be prorogued until March 24th. Over the holidays, I've also had a chance to reflect and have had long talks with my family about our future. Throughout the course of my career, any success I have personally achieved has been because of their support and with their encouragement. So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election. Mes chers amis, comme vous savez,
Dear
je suis un
friends,
fighter.
as you know, I
Dans
am
mon
a
fort
fighter.
intérieur, je me suis toujours battu parce que je me soucie
Deep inside, I've
profondément
always
des
fought
Canadiens.
because I care deeply about Canadians,
Toujours motivé
and
parce
I
qu'il est
will
dans le meilleur
always be
intérêt
motivated
des
by
Canadiens.
what is in the best interest of
Le fait
Canadians.
que
The
malgré
fact
tous les
is
efforts
that
déployés pour
despite
passer à
all
travers,
efforts
le Parlement est
to
paralysé
get
depuis
through
des mois.
this time,
Après ce qui a été la
Parliament
plus
has been
longue
paralyzed for
session de
months
Parlement
after what has
minoritaire
been the
dans
longest
l'histoire de
session
notre
of a minority parliament
C'est
in our
pourquoi ce
country's
matin,
history.
j'ai rencontré
And that
la
is why
gouverneure
this morning
générale pour
I
lui faire
met with the
savoir
Governor
que nous
General
avions
to
besoin
tell her
d'une
that
nouvelle
we
session du Parlement.
needed a new session of
Elle a
Parliament.
accédé à ma demande
She
et la
accepted my
Chambre
request,
sera donc
and so
prorogée
the House of
jusqu'au
Commons
24
will be
mars.
prorogued until March 24th.
Pendant le temps des fêtes,
During the
j'ai
holidays,
également eu
and
l'occasion de
I had the
réfléchir
opportunity
et d'avoir
to
de longues
reflect
conversations avec
and to
ma
have
famille
long talks with my
quant à
family
notre avenir.
with regards to our future.
Tout au long de ma carrière, tout le
Throughout my
succès que j'ai
career,
eu
all my
personnellement
success
est dû à leur
is
soutien
due to
et à
their
leur
support
encouragement.
and to their
Donc, hier soir,
encouragements.
au souper,
So last
j'ai
night
partagé
over
avec
dinner,
mes enfants la décision
I
que je
told my
partage avec
kids
vous tous aujourd'hui.
what I am telling you
J'ai
here today.
l'intention de démissionner
I will
de mon
resign
poste de chef du Parti libéral
as
du
leader of the
Canada
Liberal
et
Party of
ministre
Canada
une
and as
fois
Prime
que le
Minister.
parti aura choisi
After
son
the
prochain
party
chef
will
à
have
l'issue du
selected
processus national
its next leader
rigoureux
after a
et
rigorous,
compétitif.
competitive, and
Hier
national
soir, j'ai
process.
demandé au président du parti de
Last
commencer
night,
les
I
études
asked the
nécessaires.
president of the Liberal Party to begin this
Le
process.
pays mérite un choix clair
Our
et
country
réel
deserves a real
lors des
choice
prochaines élections.
during the
Il est
next
devenu
election,
évident pour
and
moi
it's become
que si je
obvious
dois
for
me
me
concentrer sur des
that if I
batailles
have
internes,
to fight
je
internal
peux pas
battles,
être la meilleure option
I
lors de
cannot
cette
be
élection.
the best choice.
Le Parti libéral du
The
Canada
Liberal
est
Party
une
of Canada
institution importante dans l'histoire
is
de
an
notre
important
grand pays
institution
et de
in the
notre
history
démocratie.
of our great country
Un
and our
nouveau Premier
democracy.
ministre
A
et
new
chef du
Prime
parti
Minister and leader of the
portera
party
les valeurs et les idées
will
du
carry
Parti
forth
libéral
the
dans la
ideas and the
prochaine
values
élection.
of the Liberal Party
J'ai
during the
hâte
next election.
d'observer
I'm
le
looking
déroulement
forward
de ce processus
to
dans les
watching
mois à
this
venir.
process unfold over the following
Nous
months.
avons été élus pour la
We were
troisième
elected
fois en 2021
in
pour
2021 for a
renforcer
third
l'économie
mandate
après
to
la
reinforce the
pandémie
economy
et
after
faire
the
progresser
pandemic
les intérêts
and
du
to
Canada
advance the
dans un
interests
monde
of Canada
complexe.
in a complex
Et
world.
c'est exactement
And
ce que
that
je vais
is
continuer
exactly
à
what I will
faire,
continue to
ce que
do
nous allons
and what we
continuer à
will
faire
continue to do
pour les Canadiens.
for Canadians.
The Liberal Party of Canada is an important institution in the history of our great country and democracy. A new Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party will carry its values and ideals into that next election. I'm excited to see the process unfold in the months ahead. We were elected for the third time in 2021 to strengthen the economy post-pandemic and advance Canada's interests in a complicated world. And that is exactly the job that I and we will continue to do for Canadians. Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to questions, starting with Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Hello, Mr. Trudeau.
Vous vouliez le faire, ce combat contre Pierre
You wanted
Poilievre.
to
Des
have
batailles internes, il y en a dans votre
an
parti
election
depuis
with
plusieurs mois
Pierre
déjà.
Poilievre as your
Pourquoi est-ce
opponent.
que vous
There have been
décidez
internal
d'abdiquer
battles for a
maintenant?
while.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a
Why are you
justifié?
giving up now? What made you change your mind?
Comme vous savez, je suis pas
As you
quelqu'un
know,
qui recule facilement
I
devant un
don't
combat,
easily back down
surtout un combat
faced
si
with a fight,
important
especially
pour
a
le
very
parti.
important one for our party and for the country.
Mais
But
je fais ce job parce que
I do this job
l'intérêt des Canadiens et le bien-être
because
de notre pays, de notre démocratie,
the interests of Canadians and the well-being of our democracy is something that I hold dear.
c'est devenu clair
And it's
que,
become clear to me
je ne
that
peux pas être,
I cannot
le chef dans les prochaines
be the
élections
leader
à cause de
during the
batailles.
next elections, internal battles.
As you all know, I am a fighter, and I am not someone who backs away from a fight, particularly when the fight is as important as this one is. But I have always been driven by my love for Canada, by my desire to serve Canadians, and by what is in the best interest of Canadians. And Canadians deserve a real choice in the next election. And it has become obvious to me with the internal battles that I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
Vous êtes au pouvoir depuis près de 10
You've
ans.
been in power
Le
for nearly
Canada a
10
changé
years.
avec votre
Canada
gouvernement.
has changed with
S'il
your
y a
government.
une réalisation
If there's
nommée dont vous êtes le plus fier,
one
dans votre
accomplishment that you're the
intervention
most proud
et
of,
peut-être
I know
un
there are
regret
several,
aussi.
but perhaps the thing you are most proud of, and maybe one regret?
On a été
Answer.
élus sur
In
une
2015, we were
promesse de
elected
travailler
on
pour
a
la classe
promise
moyenne.
to work for the middle class in this country,
Et c'est ce qu'on a pu faire.
and that is what we did.
On a réduit la pauvreté,
We reduced the
on a
level of
aidé
poverty.
énormément les familles,
We helped families.
on a créé une économie
We
qui
created
fonctionne
an
pour
economy
bien plus
that
de monde
works
en se
for many
préparant
more
à un
people
avenir
while
et
preparing for the
post-numérique
future,
et
a more digital
où le
future,
changement climatique
and
va
to
avoir un plus
prepare
grand impact.
for a world where climate change will have a greater
On
impact.
a fait énormément de travail
We've
avec
done
les
a lot
Canadiens.
of
Le
work with
Canada est
Canadians,
meilleur
and
à cause
Canada
du travail
is
que
better
nous avons
off
tous
due
fait
to
au
the
cours des
work that
dernières
we've
années.
all done over the past few years.
Un regret,
A regret?
je continue à penser que
I
si
continue to think that
notre système électoral
if our
aurait été
electoral
changé
system had been changed
pour que les gens puissent
so
mettre
that
un
people
premier, un
would be
deuxième,
able to
troisième choix sur le
have
bulletin,
a first, second, and third
les
choice on the
partis auraient
ballot,
passé plus de temps à
parties would have
regarder
spent
les
more
points qu'ils avaient
time
en commun pour
looking
être
at their
les
points in
deuxième ou
common
troisième choix des voteurs,
to be the second or third choice of voters rather than to see this polarization.
Mais je ne pouvais pas de façon
But
unilatérale
I could not
changer
unilaterally change our ballot system.
We got elected in 2015 to fight for the middle class, and that's exactly what we've done over the past years. We reduced their taxes, we increased the benefits to families, we made sure the economy was focused on working for everyone and not just a few, and that has changed. That has dropped poverty rates in Canada, that has brought more people into the workforce, that has moved us forward on reconciliation in a way that has deeply improved the opportunities and success of Canadians, despite the incredibly difficult times the world is going through right now. There's lots more work to be done, and I know that this party and this country and Canadians will keep doing it. If I have one regret, particularly as we approach this election, well, there are probably many regrets that I will think of, but I do wish that we'd been able to change the way we elect our governments in this country so that people could simply choose a second choice or a third choice on the same ballot, so that parties would spend more time trying to be people's second or third choices, and people would have been looking for things they have in common instead of trying to polarize and divide Canadians against each other. I think in this time, figuring out how to pull together and find common ground remains something that is really important for democracies. But I could not change unilaterally without support of other parties our electoral system. That wouldn't have been responsible.
Prochaine question. Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. Prime Minister, up until 3 weeks ago, you were intending to stay. And it seems that the event 3 weeks ago of Ms. Freeland coming out and saying you were firing her as your finance minister was the catalyst that brought us here today. So can you explain your side of what happened there?
Chrystia has been by my side for close to 10 years now. She has been an incredible political partner through just about everything we have done as a government and as a party over the past decade. I had really hoped that she would agree to continue as my deputy prime minister and take on one of the most important files that not just this government, but this country is facing, but she chose otherwise. In regards to what actually happened, I am not someone who's in the habit of sharing private conversations. Chrystia a été depuis presque 10 ans maintenant.
Chrystia was by my side for nearly 10 years. She was a political partner, a crucial political partner, given everything that we've gone through as a party and as a government. And I really would have wanted for her to choose to continue as my deputy prime minister. And that she would take over one of the most important files that we will have to deal with in the next few months. But she did not want to do that. As for details, I'm not one to share details of private conversations.
About the Liberal Party as an institution and the internal battles right now, but I'm wondering if you feel that another leader will have more success than you will at beating Pierre Poilievre in the next campaign.
Pierre Poilievre's vision for this country is not the right one for Canadians. Stopping the fight against climate change doesn't make sense. Backing off on the values and strength in diversity that Canada has always worked to pull itself together on is not the right path for the country. Attacking journalists, the CBC institutions, that's not what Canadians need in this moment. We need an ambitious, optimistic view of the future, and Pierre Poilievre is not offering that. And I look forward to the fight as progressives across this country stand up for the kind of vision for a better country that Canadians have always carried, despite the tremendous pressures around the world to think smaller, to veer towards the hard right, and to be less ambitious for what we can be and do as a country when the world really needs Canada.
That's not an answer, though. Yes or no? Is there another leader that could beat him?
Absolutely.
Sur le leader?
Oui.
Est-ce que vous
Pierre Poilievre.
en français, s'il vous plaît? Merci.
Pierre Poilievre a une vision
Pierre Poilievre has a very small vision and the wrong vision for Canada, if we even accept that vision. He wants to back off on fundamental values, wanting to stop the fight against climate change, refusing to invest in a greener and more inclusive economy, trying to divide Canadians rather than uniting them to face the future together in an ambitious and optimistic way. That is not the right choice for Canadians. And I'm looking forward to be part of a progressive movement that will seek out a better future for our country and for Canadians. An optimistic vision for Canadians. Hélène Buzettier. Hello, Mr. Trudeau. 16 years ago, in December 2008, Stephen Harper prorogued Parliament to avoid a vote of non-confidence that he knew that he would lose because the three opposition parties would vote against him. It's the exact same situation that you find yourself in today. Stéphane Dion at the time had said, and I quote, that this was an affront to democracy. I'd like to know why what was bad for conservatives of Stephen Harper should be good for the Liberals of Justin Trudeau. The Governor General in 2008 had concluded, and correctly so, that the House had given formal confidence to Mr. Harper's government, despite a signed letter. This was a political document at the time. The voice of the House counts. So before stopping the work at the House over the holidays, we won 3 non-confidence votes. And so we're going to have to test the confidence of the House as of March to adopt the necessary budgetary credit so that the government can continue to function.
In 2008, the Governor General correctly concluded that because the very last times in the previous weeks that the confidence of the House had been tested, it had passed that confidence test, Harper continued to have confidence in the House. It actually would bear out because as soon as they came back from the prorogation, Stephen Harper won a confidence vote once again. So a political document or political speeches doesn't carry the kind of weight that winning a confidence vote means. But this prorogation will take us only into March, and there will be confidence votes in March in the passing of supply that will allow Parliament to weigh in on confidence in a way that is entirely in keeping with all the principles of democracy and the workings of our strong institutions.
With all due respect, isn't there something a little bit anti-democratic to suspend the possibility of the House of expressing their non-confidence while your party is looking for its savior? Shouldn't you call an election right now? Well, I think that, as everyone in the press gallery, the parliamentary press gallery knows, the extent to which Parliament has been paralyzed now for several months. We are stuck on a question of privilege. There are constant obstructionist motions being presented, and we've accomplished very little over the past few months. The House of Commons needs a reset. People need to calm down and to get back to work for Canadians and not play petty politics constantly. And that is what we're seeing on behalf of the Conservatives right now. So this reset has 2 elements. Prorogation, to begin with. This allows us to start over with a fresh, new approach at the Parliament. And secondly, the Liberal Party will begin the process to choose a new leader. And I expect that if I am not the one who will lead the party to the next elections, the polarization that we see right now at the House of Commons should also settle down. Canadians need a fully functioning Parliament, specifically during the complex period, and both elements will represent the reset that we need. In English, but can you explain why you're not calling an election?
The parliamentary press gallery and anyone who's been watching politics closely over the past months will know that Parliament has been entirely seized by obstruction and filibustering and a total lack of productivity over the past few months. We are right now the longest serving minority government in history, and it's time for a reset. It's time for the temperature to come down, for the people to have a fresh start in Parliament, to be able to navigate through these complex times, both domestically and internationally. And the reset that we have is actually two parts. One is the prorogation, but the other part is recognizing that removing me from the equation as the leader who will fight the next election for the Liberal Party should also decrease the level of polarization that we're seeing right now in the House and in Canadian politics, and allow people to actually focus on serving Canadians in this House and with their work the way Canadians deserve.
On va prendre une dernière question.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Stephanie Taylor with the National Post. Given, as you just said, there's going to be confidence votes in March, opposition parties have said they are prepared to bring down your government. What kind of chances do you think you are leaving to your successor, given that there will only be mere weeks for them to introduce themselves to Canadians before heading into an election, potentially?
I have a tremendous amount of confidence in both Canadians and in parliamentarians' interest in serving Canadians in the right way. We're in a minority government right now, and there hasn't been an active leadership in a minority government in more than 50 years in this country. And there is always going to be the challenge of having a leadership race while a parliament would face confidence votes in the course of delivering supply to the government. So this is something that we're going to navigate through, but I truly feel that removing the contention around my own continued leadership is an opportunity to bring the temperature down, have a government that will focus on the complex issues that are coming forward in the coming months, while the party gets to have a full national process that brings in people from right across the country and makes a determination about the best person to carry the progressive liberal standard into the next election.
Can you clarify whether ministers who would like to campaign for your job will have to step out of cabinet? And how can the Liberal government be in a position to protect Canadian businesses and Canadians from the threat of tariffs from incoming President Donald Trump when members of the government are going to be focused on who's going to be taking your job?
The government will still, and the cabinet will still be very much focused on doing the job that Canadians elected us to do in 2021, which is fight for their interests, stand up for their well-being, and make sure that they are good and that Canadians are protected and strong. There will be a leadership process and the rules will unfold over the coming weeks. But I can assure you that the tools and the need to stand up for Canadians, to protect Canadians in their interests and continue to fight for the economy is something that everyone in this government will be singularly focused on. Je peux souligner que, évidemment, les règles et les
I can say
conditions du
that
leadership
the rules and conditions for the leadership of the Liberal Party will be discussed in the following weeks. The government that was elected to protect Canadians and their interests in a very complex world that was elected in 2021 will continue to work with a focus and a singular emphasis on working in the interest of Canadians, while the party itself does what's necessary in order to go through a leadership process. Thank you.
Merci tout le monde. Merci d'être ici dans une belle journée d'Ottawa. Bonne journée.
And that is Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada and leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, announcing that he will not hold that job much longer. Hello, I'm Rosemary Barton, Chief Political Correspondent, here with our special coverage of this monumental day in Canadian politics. Justin Trudeau confirming what we've been reporting this morning, that indeed he is stepping away from his role, saying that while this is a critical moment in the world, and he is a fighter, he has realized that he cannot continue to fight an election as he fights internal battles, told Canadians that he only told his kids last night at dinner that he was making this decision, to give you an idea of how he struggled with that decision over time. And he called for a leadership process, which he says it should be, quote, robust, nationwide and competitive in choosing the next leader. The Parliament also has been prorogued until March 24th, which gives the Liberal Party some time to put that process in place. But a slightly emotional Justin Trudeau, obviously making an announcement that he didn't want to make, but felt at this point that he had no further choice. The host of Power and Politics, David Cochrane, is here, CBC's senior writer, Aaron Wary, and writer, author of a book about Justin Trudeau and his leadership. I guess there won't be a follow-up, Aaron, at this stage. David, what did you take from what Justin Trudeau had to say?
It was interesting. The Prime Minister said in announcing why he was leaving that it became very clear to him that if he has to keep fighting internal battles, he can't be the credible choice for Canadians in the next election. You can either say he's an acknowledgement of the caucus unrest, or you could say he's pointing the finger at the caucus unrest as the reason that he is leaving. It to some degree ignores the fact that they lost Toronto St. Paul's, lost LaSalle-Verdun, lost Langley-Cloverdale by a massive margin. All seats they held, which they do not hold as of today. And Andy Fillmore, who is now the mayor of Halifax, was the MP for Halifax, resigned as the MP in August. And there still isn't a candidate in place as we get into January. He's got 54 days, I believe, to call that by-election. So there is the internal political dynamic, which he acknowledges. There's also the external political dynamic, which he kind of did not acknowledge. But he has landed on a decision that has seemed inevitable and obvious for quite some time, though you could see when you heard him at a place we're used to hearing him speak, though not for quite a while, how tough this was, how difficult this was, and how reluctant he was to do this. Like, as he said, he was a fighter, and I think that's true. Like, I've joked that I feel like he's had his sweat gland surgically removed because he doesn't seem to get nervous, right? He stares things down and he takes them on. This was too big of a thing for him to do that. And that's why we're now going to be going into this leadership process to pick a new prime minister.
He did seem relaxed. He seemed himself. He seemed at peace with the decision, Aaron. But again, I think telling your kids the day before you announce it is probably an indication of how long you may have struggled with this decision. He also talked about Pierre Poilievre, saying that, again, he didn't believe his vision was the right one for Canada, but he said he absolutely believed that there was someone out there that could beat him, which I thought was kind of interesting too, because, you know, maybe 5 days ago, he would have thought he was that person.
He probably still, to a certain
Yeah, he
extent,
probably
is that
still,
person.
yeah.
I thought he looked humbled. I thought, actually, for the first time that I can remember, he looked older. He looked like he had actually aged. I think, you know, it felt like a lot of the affectation that sometimes goes into the way he speaks publicly was drained out of him today. And, you know, granted, that is sort of a classic observation when someone concedes defeat, that was their finest moment and they were so eloquent. If only we'd seen that person more in the previous months. But I think it was striking to see him today. I think his diagnosis is correct, that if you're a party leader, if you're a prime minister, you can't plausibly contest an election with that much kind of internal dysfunction around you or behind you. There was always a plausible argument for Justin Trudeau staying on as leader and leading the Liberals into the next election, even as things got quite bad. The problem, I guess the requirement for that, though, was that he had to at least be able to hold together caucus and cabinet. And once cabinet and caucus fell out behind him, once caucus aligned against him, once Chrystia Freeland left, there just wasn't a path forward. I think it's interesting that he is viewing this in terms of removing himself from the debate, from the picture, and whether that changes things. I think that is a big question now. I'm sure the Conservatives were banking on running against Justin Trudeau in the next election. They will now have to make some different calculations. And voters themselves will now have to look and say, was it Justin Trudeau we didn't want, or was it the Liberal Party we didn't want? Is it the Conservative Party we want?
Yes.
Those are the questions that now get, I guess, could get a bit clearer now that Justin Trudeau, who has been as public and prominent a prime minister as we've ever had, has now removed himself from the picture.
David, do you want to
We've got a statement from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, and often on days like this, you see the "thank you for your service" statement. That's not what this statement is. Jagmeet Singh says Justin Trudeau's Liberals let down Canadians. They let you down on home prices. They let you down on healthcare. They let you down by allowing corporate greed to run wild. Even with the country facing another serious blow to Canadian jobs and our cost of living, this time from Donald Trump, they're still focused only on themselves and their political fate. The problem is not Justin Trudeau. It's every minister that's been calling the shots. It's every Liberal MP that looked down their nose at Canadians who are worried about high costs or crumbling healthcare. The Liberals do not deserve another chance, no matter who is the leader. It goes on like that for a couple more paragraphs where he takes shots at Pierre Poilievre.
I wonder where that guy's been for the past 6
Yeah,
months.
but that's, normally it's served himself difficult times, served the country difficult times, sacrificed himself. No, this is about, right now, there is a vacuum of progressive leadership that will be filled potentially by the Liberal leadership race, but Jagmeet Singh is trying to fill it now.